In the mountains of eastern Kentucky, the courthouse isn't just where justice is served, it's where stories unfold. Some simple, some strange, and some that no one ever saw coming. For years, Sheriff Shawn, Mickey Stines as he was known, and Judge Kevin Mullins were two of the most recognizable faces in Letcher County. A sheriff who walked the beat like he was born to wear the badge, and a judge who ran his courtroom with patience, wit, and an encyclopedic knowledge of local law. They weren't just co-workers. They were friends, lunch buddies, courthouse veterans, twin pillars of law and order in a place that depended on both. But behind paneled walls and small-town civility, a storm had been building, one full of allegations, secrets, and scandal. And in the fall of 2024, that storm broke. It happened in a matter of minutes. A private meeting behind a courthouse door, raised voices, then silence, followed by gunfire. When the dust settled, a beloved judge lay dead in his own chambers, and the man accused of pulling the trigger, his friend, the sheriff. What could push a man sworn to protect the law to turn his weapon on the very person upholding it? To understand that, we have to rewind, because this isn't just a story about a murder in a courthouse. It's about what was happening inside it. Welcome to Creepalachia, where tonight we are diving into this insane Eastern Kentucky murder case with the Sheriff Shawn Mickey Stines, who has allegedly, it's on camera, but allegedly murdered Judge Kevin Mullins. We're going to dive into the details of this case, and I'm so glad for you to join us. So before we get started, please like this video. Be sure to subscribe to Creepalachia. If you're listening on the podcast, leave a review after this episode is over on Apple or Spotify. It'll really help the show be found. But thank you for joining us tonight. Let's go ahead and get started with Act 1. All right, so let's rewind to before the gunshots, before the courthouse lockdown, before the headlines screamed, "Sheriff kills judge." Back to the rhythms of Letcher County, Kentucky. Population 20,000 and some change, where law and order wasn't just upheld, it was personified by two men, Sheriff Shawn Mickey Stines and District Judge Kevin Mullins. They weren't strangers. They weren't just colleagues. They were two practically stitched into the same uniform. Mullins, the judge, was the seasonal legal mind, sharp, affable, and deeply rooted in the mountain community. He'd been on the district court bench since 2009, handling traffic cases, probate, juvenile hearings, misdemeanors, the essential nuts and bolts of small-town justice. He graduated from the University of Kentucky, go Wildcats, earned his law degree from the University of Louisville, and started as a local prosecutor in 2001. In a place where everyone knows your grandfather's middle name, Mullins had the pedigree and the patience that kept the docket moving and the peace mostly kept. Stines, by contrast, wore a badge with a bit more edge. He started off as a bailiff in Mullins's courtroom, no less, learning the justice system from just outside the judge's bench. Now, over time, he climbed the ranks, eventually becoming the elected sheriff of Letcher County in 2018. He won re-election in 2020. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a practical haircut and no-nonsense demeanor, Stines played the role of small-town sheriff to the hilt. He was seen as fair, even-keeled, and familiar. He also wasn't shy about visibility, attending local events, staying active in county politics, and building a reputation as someone who knew how to get things done. Now, their connection was more than procedural. It was personal. Mullins and Stines had shared years of courthouse camaraderie. From bailiff briefings to bench rulings, they often ate lunch together, traded the kind of banter that comes from mutual respect, and publicly supported one another. In the high-trust, low-privacy world of Letcher County government, theirs was a relationship built on time, proximity, and shared civic duty. But in that intimacy lay a quiet irony. The judge and the sheriff, two sides of the same coin, knew each other's rhythms, their habits, and tales. They'd spent years co-managing a justice system that served thousands of locals. If there were cracks forming in that bond, they'd likely know. If one of them was slipping, the other would probably be the first to spot it. And if one had secrets, the other might just be close enough to see through them. So when Sheriff Stines walked into Judge Mullins' chambers on the afternoon of September 19th, 2024, no warrant, no suspect, no backup, nobody batted an eye. It was just Mickey and Kevin doing what they always did. Two men, decades in the making. One courtroom, and a meeting that would end with one on the floor and the other in cuffs. The Letcher County Courthouse looks like 100 others across small-town America. A cement facade, flag out front, metal detector just inside the door. But what was whispered through the halls in 2022 would send tremors through the very foundation of local justice. At the center of it all, a civil lawsuit that accused the courthouse of harboring something far worse than inefficiency or small-town drama. It alleged abuse, coercion, a twisted form of power leveraged against the people it was supposed to protect. The suit was filed by Sabrina Atkins, a woman who'd been on house arrest through the county's home incarceration program. Her allegations were explosive. She claimed that Deputy Ben Fields, employed by the Letcher County Sheriff's Department, pressured her and two other women to perform sexual acts in exchange for preferential treatment. More monitoring leniency, overlooked violations, relaxed restrictions, all of it, allegedly, on the table for a price. A very specific one. And here's where the story turns darker. Atkins said these acts didn't happen in seedy motels or behind patrol cars. They happened in the courthouse itself, specifically in Judge Kevin Mullins' chambers, after hours, behind locked doors. And according to Atkins, video footage existed showing other women engaged in sex acts with courthouse staff in that very office. She told police that she had seen the footage, and she named names. Among them, Deputy Fields, other unidentified officials, and Judge Mullins himself. Now, to be absolutely clear, Mullins was never charged, never arrested, or even formally investigated for criminal conduct, but his name was on the lips of multiple women in connection to the scandal. And that fact alone was enough to crack open the pristine image of a man who'd spent 15 years on the bench. And it wasn't just Mullins caught in the legal crosshairs. Sheriff Shawn Mickey Stines, who had hired supervised Deputy Fields, was named in the lawsuit as well. The complaint claimed that Stines failed to train his deputies adequately, ignored signs of misconduct, and didn't act when red flags were raised. Stines, for his part, denied any knowledge of the deputies' alleged crimes and stated under oath that he did not condone or cover up any such behavior. But the pressure was mounting. By September 2024, the case was heating up. A federal judge had allowed parts of it to move forward, and on September 16th, just 3 days before the shooting, Sheriff Stines sat for a deposition lasting several hours under questioning from attorney Ned Pillersdorf, who was representing Atkins. It did not go well, to say the least. Multiple witnesses described Stines as visibly shaken throughout the deposition. Stines was being grilled about whether or not he had ever authorized or turned a blind eye to deputies using their positions or power for sexual leverage, about whether he knew ankle monitors were being disabled to allow women to meet Fields, about how much oversight he really had over the people working under him, and what exactly he knew about what was happening inside Judge Mullins' chambers. This wasn't some technical policy dispute. These were allegations of sex for leniency schemes happening under his watch and possibly involving his friend and former colleague, the judge. Now, the following day, according to his attorney, Stines became increasingly paranoid. He allegedly told his family he believed someone was going to kidnap his wife and daughter. Stines, who is 6'4" and weighed well over 300 pounds, said he had lost 40 pounds in 2 weeks and didn't know why. Meanwhile, in the courthouse, life went on. Hearings were scheduled, dockets were processed, and somewhere behind the scenes, a meeting between Sheriff Stines and Judge Mullins was being arranged, a private chat. Just the two of them. One possible clue to the tone of the conversation came from a curious exchange overheard days before the shooting. According to the court testimony, Judge Mullins asked Stines if they needed to, quote, meet private in my chambers, end quote. The tone wasn't threatening, but it was deliberate, like something needed to be settled, off the record, man to man. Maybe they were going to clear the air. Maybe Mullins wanted to reassure his friend, or maybe, just maybe, Stines felt cornered, betrayed, or implicated. 3 days later, the sheriff walked into the judge's chambers and shut the door behind them, and no one would ever hear their conversation again. September 19th, 2024 was a Thursday. No parades, no protests, just a regular day in Whitesburg, Kentucky. The kind where you see more pickup trucks than traffic lights. And the courthouse clock ticks slow and steady. That afternoon, Judge Kevin Mullins and Sheriff Mickey Stines did what they often did. They had lunch together, just a couple of courthouse veterans catching a meal, joined by a few others. No sign of tension, no warning signs. They laughed, they talked, paid the check. Routine, predictable. But as the courthouse marked 3 p.m., the routine cracked. Sheriff Stines walked into the Letcher County Courthouse with purpose. He didn't come in with backup or a warrant. He didn't come in on official business. He came to see the judge. He passed through the courthouse lobby, entered Judge Mullins' office suite, and told staff he needed to speak with the judge privately. Now, the two men went into Mullins' chambers and shut the door behind them. Then came the voices. Not yelling, but heated enough for people nearby to notice. A courthouse employee later recalled hearing what sounded like the judge asking, quote, "Do we need to take this private in chambers?" End quote. A line that, in hindsight, sounded like an effort to keep something from spilling into the open. And then, gunfire. The courthouse, normally filled with the rustle of papers and the clack of courtroom shoes, fell into stunned silence. Inside the judge's office, no one could have survived what came next. Surveillance footage from inside the chambers, silent but visually clear, shows Stines pulling out his service weapon and opening fire. Judge Mullins, unarmed, raised his hands in what can only be described as a defensive gesture. He tried to retreat, crouching behind his desk as bullets tore through the air. Stines kept firing, and when the judge collapsed, the sheriff walked around the desk, a calculated move, and fired one final shot at close range. Not a struggle, not a scuffle. It was execution style, cold, controlled, and captured on video. It didn't take long for people inside the courthouse to realize something terrible had happened. A 911 call was made from within the building. Officers and staff scrambled. Some thought there was an active shooter roaming the halls. Nearby schools were placed on lockdown as a precaution. The scene turned from confusion to chaos. But Sheriff Mickey Stines didn't run. He holstered his gun, walked calmly out of the judge's office, passed through the same hallways where people were ducking for cover, and exited the courthouse. On the sidewalk outside, attorney Tyler Ward happened to spot him. Ward would later say that Stines looked, quote, strangely calm, maybe too calm. Quote, he never unholstered his sidearm, end quote. He just stood there. Minutes later, law enforcement approached him. Stines didn't resist. He didn't try to explain. He said only one thing, quote, be fair to me, end quote. Inside the judge's office, the scene was grisly. Mullins lay behind his desk, bleeding out onto the floor. Emergency responders rushed in, but it was already too late. The judge, respected, feared by a few, liked by most, was dead on the scene. No weapon was found on Mullins. No indication of a fight, just paperwork scattered from the gunfire. a chair knocked askew, and a silent camera that had captured it all. The Letcher County Courthouse was quickly shut down. Kentucky State Police arrived. Troopers in tactical gear cleared the building, checking each room to make sure the threat was contained. It was, thankfully. Shawn Mickey Stines, the elected sheriff of Letcher County, had just shot and killed the county's sitting district judge in his chambers, in broad daylight, in front of God and video surveillance. The courthouse didn't reopen the next day. The docket could wait on this one, because the question everyone was asking, neighbors, lawyers, deputies, family, wasn't what happened. It was why. And the man who had the answer wasn't talking. When a sheriff shoots a sitting judge in his own chambers, the first question is obvious. Why? But in the days that followed the killing of Judge Kevin Mullins, that answer wasn't handed out in a press release or buried in some courtroom filing. It had been unearthed, one layer at a time, through interviews, footage, and the quiet discomfort of a community that suddenly didn't know who to trust. Now, after his arrest on September 19th, 2024, Sheriff Shawn Mickey Stines wasn't talkative. He didn't offer a motive, no confession, no manifesto. But according to Kentucky State Police Detective Clayton Stamper, Stines did say one thing as he was being taken away. Quote, "Be fair to me." End quote. Not exactly the words of a man who just killed a friend. And yet somehow it fit the moment. Cryptic, heavy, and deeply unsettling. What investigators did have, though, was surveillance footage, silent video from inside Judge Mullins' chambers, showing the shooting in detail. Mullins had no weapon. There was no struggle, just a calm sheriff walking into an office, an argument behind a closed door, and then bullets, one after another. Then the sheriff walked out again, not fleeing, just leaving. The footage would become the centerpiece of the state's case, but video shows what happened, not why. So detectives started pulling threads. And one of the first they tugged was a deposition, several hours long, taken just 3 days before the murder. Sheriff Stines had been grilled under oath by attorney Ned Pillersdorf as part of a civil lawsuit filed by Sabrina Atkins, a former home incarceration client. In her lawsuit, Atkins alleged that Deputy Ben Fields, under Stines' command, had coerced her and other women into sex in exchange for leniency on their monitoring conditions. She claimed the encounters happened in the courthouse itself, sometimes in Judge Mullins' chambers, and that there were videos to prove it. Now, Stines in that deposition was reportedly nervous and evasive and clearly shaken. Pillersdorf later told reporters that Stines had to take as many as 10 breaks during questioning. He wasn't just being asked about Deputy Fields. He was being asked about his own oversight, how much he knew, what he allowed, and whether or not he turned a blind eye to a toxic and exploitive culture in the very courthouse he helped run. And then something strange happened. According to court testimony from KSP Detective Stamper, on the day of the shooting, just before he opened fire, Stines attempted to call his daughter from both his own phone and Judge Mullins' phone. The judge's phone, investigators discovered, had Stines' daughter's number saved in the contacts. It wasn't clear whether that meant anything or not, but in a moment of rage and fear, it might have meant everything to Stines. Now, after the shooting, another trooper reported that Stines made a chilling remark. Quote, "They're trying to kidnap my wife and kid," end quote. He didn't say how, but the fear, real or imagined, was clearly there. Now, his lawyer, Jeremy Bartley, later said publicly that Stines was unraveling in the days before the shooting. After the deposition, family members and colleagues reportedly noticed him becoming paranoid. He wasn't sleeping. He thought someone was out to hurt his family. They tried to convince him to seek medical help. He didn't go. And while the sheriff unraveled, the courthouse scandal kept growing. Deputy Ben Fields, the man at the center of the sex for leniency accusations, would go on to plead guilty to rape, tampering with physical evidence, and other charges tied to his conduct. And while neither Stines nor Judge Mullins were ever formally charged in connection with that criminal case, Stines was named in the civil lawsuit. Atkins claimed that Fields showed her videos, recordings allegedly taken inside the judge's chambers, showing multiple women engaging in sex acts with court officials. She claimed Mullins himself was in at least one of those tapes. Now, it's worth repeating, Mullins was never charged, and now, of course, he never will be. But the allegations cast a long shadow. Now, attorney Pillersdorf would later say bluntly that, quote, that courthouse was being run like a brothel, end quote. So it's pretty bad. And even more disturbing, a local police interview with Atkins later leaked to the press, included audio of her describing how she was made to watch those videos, and how one featured the judge, quote, he does have some videotapes, end quote, she told investigators, and also, quote, in the judge's chambers with girls, sexual and stuff, end quote.
Have you seen the videos?
I've seen one partly, and just him having sex with girls for to be able to get out of jail.
Who was having sex?
Ben and just some higher ups.
What did you see on the video? I mean,
I've seen Judge Mullins having sex with a girl.
Who was the girl?
I don't know, because I don't know a lot of people from over there.
Where was it at?
In his office, in the judge's chambers.
Is that the same place that you were meeting Ben? Is that how you know it was a judge in chambers? And this was Judge who?
Mullins.
Do you know for sure that was a judge?
Yes.
I mean, how do you know that's the judge?
I've been in front of him. His face is pretty clear on that.
Now, the tapes have not been made public yet, and law enforcement hasn't confirmed their existence. But the timing? Impossible to ignore. Now, on September 16th, a brutal deposition on September 18th, Stines starts telling people he believes his family is in danger, and on September 19th, he walks into the judge's office and shoots him dead, execution style. Now, was it a mental break? A reaction to guilt, rage, retaliation? You tell me in the comments below. We don't know yet, but the Kentucky State Police didn't offer a motive in their early statements. They confirmed the argument, they confirmed the video, but when asked why, they said they couldn't say. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And it's interesting that they confirmed the video, because that tells you in the judge's chambers, there is video. So if Miss Atkins' accusations come true, and obviously Deputy Fields already pleaded guilty, we'll see how this unfolds. But the ripple effect had already begun back then. Now, Judge Mullins, who was 54, was buried days later, remembered publicly for his fairness, his kindness, his 15 years of service. Privately, though, many in the community whispered about the lawsuit, the videos, the rumors. Now, Sheriff Stines, who was 43, had already been replaced. The courthouse, after briefly shutting down, was slowly reopening under outside judicial supervision. Other judges were brought in from neighboring counties to fill the bench. Armed guards were posted at the entrance. And outside the walls, the people of Letcher County tried to make sense of what just happened. Their sheriff had killed their judge, and the story behind it wasn't just tragic. It was complicated. The judge was dead. The sheriff was in cuffs, and the people of Letcher County, Kentucky were left standing in the wreckage of something they never imagined could fall apart: their faith in the courthouse. Now, after Sheriff Mickey Stines fatally shot Judge Kevin Mullins on September 19th, 2024, justice had to be recalibrated, and fast. A sheriff killing a judge is not a procedural hiccup. It's a constitutional crisis in a town where the law runs on first names and long memories. Now, within hours, Kentucky State Police had confirmed that Mullins had been shot multiple times, that he was unarmed, and that surveillance footage captured the shooting from start to finish. No ambiguity, no mystery about who pulled the trigger. The real question was why, and what would happen next. Now, the answer came in stages. First, the courthouse shut down. Dockets were canceled, cases reassigned, and a grief-stricken legal community came to grips with losing one of their own. Judge Mullins wasn't just a robe behind a bench. He had served the 47th District for 15 years. Now, when he died, local courts temporarily closed, and judges from outside counties were brought in to restore operations. The funeral was held in the gymnasium of Jenkins High School. where hundreds gathered to mourn the man many knew simply as Kevin. His widow, family, and colleagues sat near the front as State Supreme Court Justice Michelle Keller called Mullins a man of, quote, passion for people and, quote, commitment to law. There were tears, there were questions, but mostly there was silence. Because the man accused of killing him wasn't just anyone. He was a friend. Meanwhile, Stines made his first court appearance just 6 days after the killing, shackled, silent, and under heavy guard, and he was formally charged with murder. Now, the presiding judge ordered he be held without bond, and prosecutors made it clear they were treating this as the intentional killing of a public official, a charge that carries the possibility of the death penalty under Kentucky law. Now, by the end of the month and under intense political pressure, Stines submitted his resignation. Now, technically, he retired, but the distinction meant very little. He was no longer the sheriff of Letcher County. An interim sheriff was appointed while state officials made plans to permanently fill the role. Now, the badge that had once been a symbol of trust now sat behind an evidence locker door. Then came the grand jury indictment. In November of 2024, a full panel reviewed the case and returned a formal charge: murder of a public official. It was a legal escalation. Not only had Stines committed a homicide, prosecutors argued, but he had done so knowing full well the victim's role and the symbolic weight that carried. It wasn't just murder, it was a direct attack on the institution of justice. But Stines' defense team wasn't about to let the narrative write itself. Led by attorney Jeremy Bartley, the strategy became clear. They would argue insanity, or more precisely, extreme emotional disturbance, also known as EED. Now, under Kentucky law, that's a partial defense. If successful, it doesn't absolve the crime, but it can reduce murder to manslaughter, depending on how convincing the jury finds it. Now, Bartley gave a few early interviews, threading a careful line. Quote, "We believe Mickey was under tremendous psychological strain," end quote, he said. Now, and also, quote, "The evidence will show that his mental health was impaired, maybe severely," end quote. He wasn't trying to smear the judge. He wasn't pointing fingers at any one person, but the subtext was there. Stines had just undergone a grueling deposition tied to a civil suit alleging sexual coercion and abuse in the courthouse. He had reportedly gone without sleep, spoken of fears that his family was in danger, and refused medical help in the days before the shooting. His words to officers after the arrest, remember, quote, "They're trying to kidnap my wife and kid," end quote, weren't thrown out casually. They were part of the growing portrait of a man unraveling. Now, prosecutors, however, weren't buying it just yet. They filed a motion requesting that Stines undergo a full psychiatric evaluation before any mental health defense could proceed. The court agreed. And as of early 2025, Stines remains incarcerated, awaiting the results of that evaluation and the scheduling of a full trial. And outside the courtroom, the damage lingers. Letcher County, tight-knit, rural, and proud, is left trying to stitch up a wound with no clean edges. Their judge is dead. Their sheriff is disgraced. Their courthouse, once a symbol of order, now lives under the specter of scandal. Rumors still swirl, obviously, about the alleged courthouse brothel accusations, that Judge Mullins participated in sexual misconduct, that Deputy Ben Fields had video recordings, and that vulnerable women were exploited under the color of law. None of it's gone to trial. Most of it has never even been formally charged, but it's there, simmering in lawsuits and affidavits, in leaked audio recordings, in phone logs and transcripts, and whispered conversations at the grocery store. People want the truth. Some want accountability. Others just want to move on. But what happened on September 19th wasn't just a murder. It was a collapse, a quiet implosion of trust in the very people elected to uphold the law. And no verdict, no sentencing, no legal motion will erase the fact that a sheriff walked into a judge's chambers and fired the kind of shot that echoes for generations. The trial is still coming, but the verdict in the court of public opinion, that came long ago. And in Letcher County, it's still being argued. over every diner booth and gas station counter in town. That is all for tonight's case on the Kentucky Sheriff turned killer. Thank you for joining us on Creepalachia. Be sure to like this video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below about your experience. And if you're listening to the audio-only version on Apple or Spotify, take a minute, leave a review. That'll go leaps and bounds to helping the show be found. And I really appreciate your time. Stay tuned. We're going to bring you some more cases here soon. And if you have any suggestions, leave those in the comments as well. I love suggestions. We plan on doing many of these. So everyone else, other than that, always remember, long live Appalachia.